Hello, I'm Brett Knowles from PM Squared Consulting. This video is a walkthrough of the process we'll be going through on September the 4th, where we're developing a draft strategy map. In addition, I'll be telling you how the strategy map can be used to help run the association and its projects in a more effective way going forward. It's incredibly important to note that all the data is stuff that we have made up and is not based on the actual performance or strategic priorities of the association. So the executive summary is this. We should be able to take your existing strategy and draw it as a strategy map. A strategy map shows the key strategic objectives, their cause and effect relationship, and their priorities. And this strategy map becomes a foundation for a lot of great management practices. So, for example, we could add on key performance indicators so that on an ongoing basis you can see how the association is performing against its strategic targets. Now, to perform those strategic activities, we do a bunch of processes. So we can take the strategic activities and list them on the left, and the core processes across the top, and score them for their impact on achieving that strategy. That lets us identify the key performance nodes, how we should design our organization can follow from that, as well as how you manage your department. And from that, we can actually add on our assessment of how you're currently performing and determine from there how well the process is performing, where the potential gaps are, either by strategic objective or by process. From there, we can assess your initiatives and see whether the initiatives are working on those observed process gaps and ensure that we have alignment between our project portfolio and the current performance gap of your processes. Now, that's the longer story. On September 4th, the only thing we're going to be doing is building the strategy map. Now I'm going to take you through what that story looks like so you can better visualize the day. Now, there's plenty of strategy documents available to us at the association. And what we've done is we've combed through these to figure out what we think are some of the key strategies. But this is a draft, and we'll be presenting that draft strategy map to you when we get together on the 4th. The strategy map itself looks a bit like this. What we should be able to do is describe our strategy in terms of what we call 4 perspectives. Perspective number 1 is your stakeholders. What do the stakeholders expect from the association? And of course, the stakeholders are the docs, their patients, society, regulators, and so forth. Now, to make those stakeholders happy, we're going to design a whole bunch of internal processes, the work you do day in, day out. And to make those processes work, we need a bunch of enablers. We need a certain capacity of competencies. We need a culture, some strategic assets, and so forth. And then underpinning that, of course, are the financial budgets that we have to live within. So these 4 perspectives, which are the perspectives of the balanced scorecard, describe our overall strategy. So let's take some of your source documents. So for example, the business plan describes to us what the mission is. So we'll put the mission at the top just to remind us of what we're trying to achieve. Now, overall, that key for us is all about supporting physicians. So we're going to put that at the top, be an advocate for the profession. Now, we've got 3 major key result areas. Financial health. So we're going to put that up there as enabling the financial success of physicians. And we actually labeled this S1 and S2 to stand for stakeholders, objective 2. The next key result area is well-being. We'll describe that as support physician and community well-being. That becomes S3. System partnership and leadership is drive systems partnership and leadership. Put that up there as S4. So it's important to note we're not making this stuff up. It exists in your strategy documents. Now, as a cause and effect, the theory is if we do these 3 things, S2, S3, and S4, we'll achieve S1. So we'll draw those as arrows. Okay, so how do we make those things happen? So our core internal process is about enhancing values to stakeholders. Think of this as operational excellence. And if we do enhance value to stakeholders, guess what? We're going to impact S2, S3, and S4. What are the things we need to do to enhance value to stakeholders? Thing one is we need to foster innovation. And thing two is capture and share knowledge. So if we capture and share knowledge, that will help us enhance value to shareholders, and it will help us foster innovation. Now, if we foster innovation, that will support capturing and sharing knowledge. And if we capture and share knowledge, that will support driving systems, partnership, and leadership. And then underpinning all of this are the objectives of invest in our people, live our values, and a healthy AMA. And then underpinning that is secure investment and ensure financial stewardship. Now, again, this isn't precisely correct. This is a draft that we've put together based on how we've read your strategy documents. We'll be spending an hour or two on September 4th getting this correct. Now, I have to be honest with you. Some of these we made up. So you have some topics about foster innovation, but we know best practices are that all organizations have to have some element of innovation. So we've made that more explicit. And from the work we've done with the OMA, we know that's an important aspect. There's also nothing explicit about investing in our people. In your current strategy documents, it's a component of a healthy AMA, but it doesn't stand on its own. But we know it's important, so we've teased that out. You may choose to get rid of that later. A healthy AMA, of course, is really your fourth key result area that you've described in your strategy, and there's a bunch of definitions and components about that. So that's a strategy map. That's the first part of September 4th. The second part is to weight these. If this is 100% of your strategy, we should be able to allocate the 100% across these objectives. And this is super critical to do because in most organizations, going into this, the different executives have a completely different perspective of what's important. It's like, I don't know, bringing up your kids. You might think helping them get an education is important, and they think going out and playing hockey is important. So across the leadership team, you need to agree on that overall weighting. And we'll give you some guidelines to get that done, and we'll work through that on the 4th. For now, I've made some up just so we can illustrate what this looks like and how you might use it. So the weightings I made up are as follows. And a simple trick here is anything over 10% becomes a critical theme for the year. So my proposal would be that, in this hypothetical world, that our focus for this year is to build a healthy AMA so that we can continue to capture and share knowledge in aid of enhancing values to stakeholders, and in particular, physicians and physician community well-being, and continue being an advocate. Now, again, I made up these weightings. Yours is going to be different, and they don't have to, round off to 5. So you could have a 1 or a 20 or whatever you want. Just illustrative. So the strategy map. Again, that's our goal on September 4th. And this allows you to use it however you see going forward. Eventually, you can begin building a framework around this. So, for example, we can begin adding KPIs to illustrate how we're performing. Now, of course, green means we're meeting target. Yellow means we're slightly off target, but we can make it with the resources we have. And red means send help. Red means we're performing poorly enough that we need leadership help to either relieve our targets and change them or give us more resources. Now, an interesting thing is if we were meeting as a team to debate the performance, we might make the mistake of spending a lot of time on this red. But in fact, we might think about it because a red at 5% might be less important to us than a yellow at 15. In other words, the weighting allows us to take a look at the performance in strategic context so we can all agree where we should be spending our efforts. In fact, on that topic, what we should be able to do is list those strategic objectives on the left side of a sheet and your core processes across the top. We do these processes not for fun. We do these processes to help us achieve these objectives. So we should be able to score the impact of each of these processes on each objective. I'll give you an example. So again, this is random numbers I plunked in the spreadsheet, but I suggested that this process has an impact of 4 out of 5 on this objective. So 5, it means it's critical, 1 means minimal, blank, of course, means none. In this case, I gave it a score of 4. And the way the sheet works is we basically just multiply the impact by the weighting. So this cell has a value of 60 strategy points and is black. This one has only 40 strategy points, so it's dark gray. And this one has only 10, so it's light gray. So the number of strategy points illustrate to us where the critical performance nodes are. And this is important because later on, if you want to do drill down KPIs, obviously you want to first get those black areas measured and then later on the gray ones. But it also allows us to identify the critical performance nodes. So if you're running this process, I now know what you need to focus on. It also informs you of how to design your organization. You obviously want to put your best people where the blacks are, but you also want to make sure that the organization is designed to make sure you achieve those objectives. It allows you to know where to put your best people and also allows you to build effective cross-functional teams. I know who should be on each team based on, is there a black square there or not? Now, if we added our assessment of how we're actually performing using the same criteria. So 5 means I'm meeting performance expectations. 1 means I'm performing poorly. We can begin to put our performance into strategic context. What do I mean by that? Well, take a look here. We have, for finance, we have an impact of 3 and a performance of 3, and this indicator's green. But here we have the same impact and performance, and it's yellow. And here I have the same performance and impact, but it's red. Why is that? Well, it's the weighting. If it's only a 5%er, our performance of 3 is acceptable. If it's a 10%er, 3 is, marginally acceptable. But if it's red, that's a critical. If it's 15, it's red, it's critical. What we're seeing here is based on the strategic importance, I'm going to interpret my performance differently. I'll give you an example, right? That kid we talked about before, let's say that kid wants to grow up to be a doc. And they come home with a C in biology and a C in art. What are you going to focus on? The C in biology, because it's strategically more important, and therefore that performance of a C requires more attention than the C in art. Now, if you change the kid's strategy and they're actually going to become an artist, it now flips, and the art score is more important, and that's what you focus on. Now, these are just numbers. We can actually add them up to give you this chart. What this chart looks at is it says for each of these objectives, and again, remember all these numbers are made up, enhance value to stakeholders. This is the height of the bar represents the amount of process support we need. The blue part represents how well we're currently performing, and the gold is the gap between current performance and what the strategy calls for. What this allows us to do is find out where the largest gaps are and make sure that we're investing in closing those gaps as much as possible. In fact, we can add that up by process and see which processes have the largest gaps. And again, this is just fictitious data. Don't you wish you knew what the actual numbers were? And this makes sure that we do our process improvement where it has the most impact. So again, our goal now is to close those performance gaps, the gold bars from that first chart I showed you. To do that, you're going to launch a bunch of projects. And again, these are projects I harvested from your strategy document. They might not be the best ones to use, but the idea is we score them the same way. We list the objectives down the left, those core processes across the top, and how many resources it takes to accomplish them, and we score them the same way from 1 to 5. Now remember, their goal is to close these gaps. Now what we'll do is we'll add it up the same way, but we'll just chart them as red dots this time. So you can see from the project portfolio, we have a whole bunch of projects around capturing and sharing knowledge, and not many projects around enhancing value to stakeholders, and none around financial stewardship. Now, if we combine those two charts, we should see how aligned the portfolio is. Now, in this case, we see we've got gaps that we're under-resourcing. In other cases, we've got gaps that we seem to be over-resourcing. In other words, we've got a misalignment between the process gaps and the project portfolio. Now, this is normal. In most organizations, there's about a 66% misalignment of resources. And so this allows us to make sure the projects are focused on the right things. So there's many other ways that this tool can be used, but for now, that gives you a good overview of what we can accomplish. The idea is we're going to work on the 4th to develop your strategy map with your strategic objectives and weightings. Now, based on that, you don't need to do anything else. Even that will allow you to align your organization more consistently with the overall strategic goals. But you could, at some later point in time, add in key performance indicators. Again, at some other point in time, you can assess whether your projects are impacting those strategic objectives and how to focus your organization design and staff and so forth. We can take a look at how you're performing and begin to identify the strategic performance gaps in your processes, either by strategic objective or process. We can then take a look at your initiatives and score them to see whether they're actually aligned to those performance gaps or not. The last thing I want to leave you with is a view of an even broader picture. This is what we call the PM² executive suite. These are the things that you are responsible for as an executive. Now, to put this story into context, you own the strategy and the values, and based on that, as we just illustrated, we can create a strategy map. By adding KPIs or indicators to it, we can build you that balanced scorecard. What I then showed you is going down this path here of doing a strategic process analysis. That's that black and white ontology to check for organization design corrections and so on. From there, I then took us down this path over here to say, what if we took a look at our projects? We could see if those were aligned or not. Then I alluded to the fact that we could actually use this to identify where we should be doing process improvement. We can also use this to do those drilled down metrics to give you that more detailed performance view. So that's what I showed you in the slide deck so far. Where that takes you is this can be used over here to eventually underpin rewards and compensation by building employee engagement, self-managed work teams, and what's now called OKRs. The balanced scorecard allows us to cascade down to departments, teams, and initiatives and make sure that they're aligned and working correctly. Now, what we can also do, and what we did for the OMA, is take that strategy map and underpin it risks, so that now we can take a look at the risks in strategic context and provide you with a monthly scorecard of how the risks are appearing based on changes in political environment and so forth. And all of this, of course, supports a more detailed and agile business and financial planning process. So I want to make it clear that what we talked about is part of what you need to do as a leadership team. And ultimately, the goal is to have one view of the truth, to have all these things linked so that when you change your strategy, you can immediately ripple through everything in the organization and understand its impacts. This lets you do better planning, better scenario planning, better communications with the board. Our goal is to give you an overview of what we're proposing to do on September 4th and how it could lead into a more comprehensive management toolkit to help achieve AMA's strategic objectives.